America's best days are yet to come. That's because conservatives like you know and live the values our great country was built on. The Heritage Foundation exists to make sure your voice is heard in the D.C. swamp each day, shining the light on a bright future. The Heritage Foundation stands for your values and won't give up the fight because they know you never will. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Yes, it is a creepy, a chilling, and a haunting Halloween. For Democrats, that is. Yeah, creepy. Creepy comes to mind. Creepy comes to mind with that clip. By the way, that was the White House band at the trick or treat event that President Trump and First Lady Melania ended up hosting, and had a lot of fun with great decorations on the White House this year. I was thinking of creepy things, and I'm like, well, that pretty well fits the bill. You know, you imagine on Halloween, heading over to Michael Jackson's house. Hey, little boy, would you like some Jesus juice? You just say no. You just say no there. So certainly, you know, the musician behind that was creepy. Well done by the band there at the White House. Obviously, not the great one with you this Halloween. It is Brian Mudd. Always an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. We're going to have some fun walking you through some of the creepy, chilling, and haunting Halloween stories for Democrats. So we work through the news of the day in a very instructive way, as we're now 31 days into this partial federal government shutdown. A lot of freak out things that are happening out there. A lot of success that's been happening elsewhere that the president has had his hand in. You may follow me socially at Brian Mudd Radio, host of the Brian Mudd Show. I am not far from where the president is right now. He is back in Mar-a-Lago for Halloween evening. He usually has a little bit of a Halloween party at Mar-a-Lago, and it looks like this will be no exception. So my home station, WJNO in West Palm Beach, you can get the Brian Mudd Show podcast wherever you get your podcast. And as we dive in on this creepy, chilling, and haunting Halloween, starting with creepy, I was thinking of creepy. What are creepy things generally? What is the creepiest thing that comes to mind? It's still got to be Joe Biden, right? I was thinking of other people, and I'm like, no, still creepy Joe. So you have Joe Biden's sniffing of children's hair or nibbling on a child's shoulder. And those are certainly things that are known to be creepy, right? In fact, just for fun, I ended up asking Grok. All right, so I got some AI take on this. I asked Grok, what politician is known to be the creepiest? And the response I got from Grok said this: Joe Biden. Why creepy? Long history of overly tactile interactions with women and kids. Think sniffing hair, lingering hugs, and whispers that feel way too close for comfort. Well done, Grok. Well done. By the way, let's not forget showering with his adolescent daughter. Talking about creepy Joe. So anyway, Joe's brain, it might be long gone. And thank God for most voters that his presidency and that of Team Autopen is too. But the ghost of creepy Joe lives on. By the way, just for fun, when I asked ChatGPT the same thing, who is the creepiest politician? Came back with the blast from the past, a name that will be familiar to you. Sex offender, former Democrat Congressman Anthony Weiner. Remember him? Carlos Danger Man? Oh, yeah, Carlos Danger. Let's say solid pull with Weiner there by rephrase that a little bit. But ChatGPT coming up with solid results, too. But speaking of creeps, you know who is really just a creep? Who would literally vote to deny pay for people who've been going to work, doing essential work for this country every day, like serving in the military, like doing air traffic control work, the most stressful job known to man. Who would say, yeah, you got to go to work every day, do all that stuff, but we're not going to pay you on time for that? How jacked up do you have to be? How messed up do you have to be to do something like that? You have to be as jacked up. You have to be as messed up as the Democrat Party. Every single Democrat in the Senate, save 3, my view, are just anti-American scumbag creeps. Anti-American scumbag creeps. You have to be an anti-American scumbag creep to vote not to pay the folks who literally put their lives on the line every day to protect this country. And for that matter, all the essential federal workers are going to work. How do you do that? How do you make them political pawns, these people? And for those Democrats, these creeps, it's not like some costume that they're disguised in on Halloween. It's who they are throughout the year. And by the way, I've always said hate doesn't age well. Take a look. Start thinking about some of the creepy Democrats that come to mind. There are a lot of people that don't need to put on a mask. If you had a little DWS action, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, for example, she always comes to mind. Like if you kind of woke up and she was there, you'd be, whoo, no mask needed, right? There are several examples of this. I mean, Nancy Pelosi, my gosh, she's had so much work done. She looks like extraterrestrial life, doesn't she? Doesn't look like she's from this planet anymore. Kind of like Michael Jackson territory. We started there with Thriller, so yes. So anyway, while other essential federal employees are still not getting paid on time as they should be either, we did see that the military being paid today. President Trump did once again order all available funds to be identified and allocated, cover the $5.3 billion payday today. By the way, though, I mean, it's kind of like this money doesn't exist just like that, right? It's not like you just snap your fingers and whammo, the money is there. So now the funds that have been tapped into to pay the military today, because every Democrat in the Senate, say 3, are anti-American scumbag creeps. It's coming out of military housing and military research and development. I mean, that's great, right? But then again, the Democrat Party has been content to let SNAP end. The SNAP benefits tomorrow. Now, there's a real fun political game that has played out through the course of today. And that game has been, we got 2 Democrat-appointed federal judges, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, came in. Trump administration has got to pay the SNAP benefits. Okay. From where? Contingency funds. By the way, one of the judges said the Trump administration has to come back on Monday. The other is just kind of like open-ended. You got to do this. Again, where does the money exist? And so there's a question about, are there even contingency funds within the Agriculture Department that'd be sufficient to cover the SNAP benefits? Again, the money doesn't just magically exist. It doesn't just because the judge goes, you should really do this. It just happens. Now, if Democrats would simply, vote to do what Chuck Schumer always said they should do, which is never do a government shutdown in the first place, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But yeah, so the SNAP benefits tomorrow, as you had Democrats completely content to take food away from families in need, which you might say that would be chilling, right? Wouldn't that be kind of a chilling thing? Speaking of chilling things, it's chilling to think that weaponized federal government would use the full weight of the Department of Justice to target and to attempt to eliminate their political opposition. But with Arctic frost, that's exactly what special counsel Jack Smith did. So yes, special criminal Jack Smith, his chilling use of his broad prosecutorial powers led to his team issuing, as we've learned now, 197 subpoenas to 34 individuals, 163 businesses, targeting records and communications related to at least 430 named Republicans and entities, effectively creating what Chuck Grassley's Senate Judiciary Committee has identified as an enemies list. That's fun. And this included Fox News and Newsmax, Sinclair, CBS News too. And it was kind of interesting in that regard because you took a look at CBS and you're like, well, that doesn't look like these other ones. But remember that the CBS News timeline overlapped when Catherine Herridge was still there and actually reporting real news. Remember, she ended up getting fired a couple of years ago from CBS for reporting real news. What do you want to bet, by the way? If you pull on this thread enough, you're going to find out that Arctic frost is directly related to CBS News firing Catherine Herridge for doing her job. And of course, they went after members of Congress, subpoenaing their phone records and spying on them. They went after Trump's White House advisors and officials. They tracked Trump's attorneys, big donors, fundraising entities, business leaders too. All good stuff. And what was one of the other things that we've learned over the past day? Here's another fun one. So you had two wireless services, two carriers that were involved. You had Verizon and you had AT&T. You had one that stood up and acted like a real American company. You had another that acted like an arm of the DNC. So Verizon gets this request from the Biden special criminal, Jack Smith, that had been signed off on by former Team Autopen Attorney General Merrick Garland and Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco, had been signed off on by a judge in D.C. you're going to be familiar with, Boasberg, who's also been part of trying to stop Trump and allow illegal immigrants around every turn. So they're all part of this conspiracy of theirs to obtain the records to try to spy on, surveil unconstitutionally congressional Republicans. And Verizon, no resistance there whatsoever. Verizon's like, yeah, here you go. And by the way, can we do anything else for you, Mr. Special Criminal Smith? Yeah, Verizon was all about it. AT&T acted like, I don't know, a real American company. They said, crazy thing called the Constitution, and these happen to be members of Congress. You'd better have a damn good reason why you think we should be giving you anything. So AT&T pushed back because they knew what was going on there wasn't legit. And guess what? A legitimate reason was never provided to get those records. So any members of Congress that had AT&T, that special criminal Jack Smith and company were trying to get access to, they didn't. Any member of Congress that had Verizon, special criminal Jack Smith and his thugs ended up gaining access to. That's fun, isn't it? Kind of good to know these types of things when you're making decisions for yourself, I would believe. So you had all this stuff, and I would say that's all pretty chilling, right? But after the chilling Trump-Russia collusion hoax, after two impeachments, how much of a surprise is this really? So the Democrat Party is a chilling entity of Marxist swamp things. And that's why the left has been willing to do anything, including repeatedly the attempted killings of President Trump. And it is why they killed and then celebrated Charlie Kirk's assassination too. These are real life horror stories. That's who these people actually are. You can remember this. Reality always stranger than fiction. Real life has been far more chilling than fiction because I don't even know if Freddy Krueger would be so cruel. And as for the haunting aspect of things, we'll pick up there next. I'm Brian Mudd, in for the great one.
Mudd Levin.
Folks, I have a question for you. Do you believe America's best days are still ahead? With the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence coming up in less than a year, my friends at the Heritage Foundation are taking stock of the current situation, and they need your input. They've launched a survey on America's future to gauge how Americans feel right now about where we are as a nation and where we're headed in the next 250 years. You know, for decades, your American values have been under attack, but now, with President Trump's administration in office, we have an opportunity to turn the tide and usher in a new golden age for America. But the Heritage Foundation needs to hear from you. What policies do patriots like you most care about? What do you believe are the defining principles of America? What legacy do you believe we should pass on to the next generation? Please visit heritage.org/Levin today and share your feedback and help shape the future of America. That's heritage.org/LEVIN. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation.
The Republicans are very unified, they're very strong, and they want to do what's right for the country. They don't want to see trillions of dollars wasted on people that came into our country illegally, many from prisons and many from areas that you don't want to even know about.
You think the streetwalkers on Halloween are scary. These people, you don't even want to know where they came from. It's so, yeah. So Trump talking about GOP unification. He's had an amazing run of success. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin, and walking you through my creepy, my chilling, and my haunting Halloween diagnosis of things for you. And as we analyze what's been happening at this partial shutdown with Arctic frost and with some other things that are going on, like, I don't know, Tuesday's elections, there's some stuff that could be pretty haunting here. But actually, in the spirit of Halloween, question for you. Do you believe in ghosts? Do you believe in ghosts? Have you seen a ghost? Now, if you do, and if you have some company. What percentage of people you think say they believe in ghosts? What percentage of Americans right now, like, yep, believe in ghosts? Might be a little bit lower than you think. It was for me. 36%. 36% say they believe in ghosts. 24% of people, so just under a quarter, say, yep, I've seen one. So interestingly, in the supernatural realm, you actually have more people that are inclined to believe in the extraterrestrial life via, like, you know, UFOs at 39% of people than of the earthly but departed variety. So 3% more people are like, yep, we're being visited from elsewhere than believe in ghosts. And again, that could just well be looking at certain members of Congress, looking at like Nancy Pelosi and going, she doesn't look like she's from around here. And you get confused and you think extraterrestrial life and in Congress. By the way, also, more women believe in ghosts than men, but more men believe in extraterrestrial life than women. It's kind of interesting, right? By the way, I was taking a look at a separate survey and kind of interesting about people that are scared of the dark. Are you scared of the dark? Are you honest with yourself about it? Get this. You actually have more men that are worried about the dark at night than women. But more women will turn on like a nightlight or that kind of thing. And if you're one of them, you got company. They're a third of men that they're actually scared of the dark at night. I don't know how many of them are gender identifying, though. I don't know how the question was worded, like, no, did they ask your biological sex? So there is that. But in other words, a lot of people believe in hauntings of both the supernatural and extraterrestrial kind. But what's potentially more haunting than either of those things? Boy, the prospect of what New York City might look like after 4 years of Mamdani. Be right back. Brian Mudd in for the great one, Mark Levin.
We're coming upon the 250th birthday of the United States, and it has me thinking, what will America look like 250 years from now? My friends at the Heritage Foundation want to know what you think. What policies should America prioritize? What principles should carry us into the decades ahead? As America enters a new golden age, Heritage recognizes that this is the time to take stock and to be intentional about how we shape the future of America. And they can't do it without your input. So please go to heritage.org/LEVIN and let them know what you think is important. Without patriots like you stepping up and speaking up for what you believe in, America as we know it can't survive for another 250 years. Please go to heritage.org/Levin, heritage.org/LEVIN. Take the survey on America's future. This survey takes less than 10 minutes to complete, but it is critical for making sure that the America we pass on to future generations is an America we're proud of. Go to heritage.org/Levin today. That's heritage.org/LEVIN. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation.
Mark Levin doesn't just read the news, he makes the news. Call the Mark Levin Show now at 877-381-3811.
Yeah, you might think, given that the Republicans are in charge of both the House and the Senate, that a government shutdown might actually hurt the Republican brand. But in fact, it hasn't. If anything, it's been helped a little bit.
Is the one reason to watch CNN, Harry Hinton, he's their data guy, their data analyst reporter, and he's really solid, has been right along. Had some really great takes this week and going to bring a few more of them to you. That kind of summarizes this, though. And one of the reasons why the GOP is faring better during the shutdown than they even were before is because the Democrat Party has always treated you like you're stupid. And by the way, there is a massive difference between being ignorant and being stupid. Being ignorant can be fixed with more information. We are all highly ignorant in any number of different things. The more you learn in life, the more you realize how little you actually know. It's one of the great ironies, becoming more informed. However, stupidity is an aptitude issue. And Democrats have run so hard and so long on just treating the average American as though they have an aptitude issue. And I understand that because for a long time, they're like, look, these people are actually dumb enough to vote for us. They must be stupid. I understand how that happened. But people are not actually stupid. And what they were, in many cases, ignorant. And they have fixed that with information. And they realize exactly what this game is, which is Democrats literally voting not even to pay people that have been going to work every day during the partial government shutdown. They realize that rather than just signing a resolution that says, yeah, the existing laws on the books, we're going to keep those and keep moving forward as a country. They understand these basic concepts. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin as we were taking a look at the Halloween edition of the news to start the day here. And there are a lot of different things that play into what's happening from an analytics perspective. And I'm going to break down how highly instructive this partial government shutdown has been, how this has been the greatest illustration of the brilliance of Doge. And we're going to talk about how to finish that job. And also how this is the ultimate exposing of Democrats as well. There are so many things that are going to come back to haunt Democrats from what they have decided to do here. But I did mention just before the bottom of the hour, Mamdani, New York City. Boy, whatever happens next Tuesday between Virginia, New Jersey, and New York City, talk about grim prospects. New York, 4 years? What would be more haunting? 4 years of Mamdani, you have what? Illegal immigrants granted access to everything. No cash bail for anything. Rikers closed, the prisoners released. What do we have? Maybe bread lines? The government-run grocery stores? So one of the things that's interesting, hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers have already fled since the COVID seasons of lockdowns and dread. And it's likely that hundreds of thousands more will be racing for the exit door should the Marxist Islamists win next Tuesday. As Polymarket, by the way, where people are putting their money on this, now have it at a probability of 94% for Mamdani. So should he win, those who aren't fast to flee will be left for dead, or at least their businesses, wallets, and safety. And I think that's a haunting thing to envision for anyone in New York City on this Halloween. And as we take a look at what's doing here, by the way, a couple of programming notes for the great one. You do have a full roster of Life, Liberty, and Levin coming to you this weekend. Tomorrow, Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern, Fox News, Zuhdi Jasser and Ben Shapiro join the great one. Then on Sunday, again, always 8 p.m. Eastern, you got to make sure that you have your DVR set for Life, Liberty, and Levin. Record Saturday and Sunday, even if you catch it live. That way you have it. And if you somehow or another miss it, you're always good to go. You've got Douglas Murray that will be with Mark on Sunday. Life, Liberty, and Levin. And it looks like we've got some good folks here lined up. Let's go to Bob. Bob in San Jose, California. Bob, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. It's this. I want to make a point. We fund all these illegals. You're basically creating a lot of inflation. Inflation's never good. It always creates an insurance cost crisis. Labor unions are going to rally, and try to get you a noble wage. So then labor gets married to high prices, goods and services. Everything in the supply chain goes up. It's just not healthy. So I would say, if you want to come here from a foreign country and get the dream, you're going to arrive in a land that's basically unaffordable. And, of course, so you're going to get all the Pied Pipers of egalitarianism. They're going to try to tax the rich and to totally further destroy the economy. And we're at this precipice where we've got to stop trying to do things backwards and really, drive the CPI, Consumer Price Index, and all its branch operating indexes of, home ownership and business operating down, insurance policies down, so they're affordable. So we're so litigious and honorable. Everyone's got to carry an insurance policy, but now they're way up, and so you lay off a bunch of people to afford the insurance umbrella on an enterprise.
Yeah, Bob,
is making sense.
Yeah, but Bob, your point is well taken, and you're exactly right. In fact, I don't know that I ever got to it. I remember wanting to talk about my analysis of housing inflation about illegal immigrants. I remember one show a while back. I'm like, I might just have time to get there. And I don't think I ever did. But the bottom line, you can always look this up, too. If you look up, Brian Mudd and housing inflation, you're bound to find the story published. But the bottom line is, we added a double-digit increase in housing inflation alone through the importing of illegal immigrants. And the reason is a compounding effect. The inflationary aspect of illegal immigration is multi-tiered. And so the first piece of it, let's just talk about housing inflation. Where did the illegal immigrants go? They, by and large, were not homeless, right? And so aside from the ones that ended up in like 5 stars in Manhattan, with NGOs that got them there and then all the government programs, your run-of-the-mill illegal immigrants ended up in affordable housing, and government paid for affordable housing. So not only were we paying for that, one of the incredible things that I ended up illustrating over time is that the longer an illegal immigrant is in this country, the more likely they have been until this year to end up on government assistance programs. There's been this myth that, they get assimilated and they do the jobs Americans won't do. BS. They get assimilated and they figure out, man, these are all the government handouts I can get. This is great. And so over 60% of all illegal immigrants in this country on government assistance programs, most of them several, starting with the roof over the head. So what did that do? It took up all the affordable housing. So then we have a housing shortage. So then what happens? The people, the legitimate Americans that should be in affordable housing, where they go? More expensive housing. And if they can't afford that, well, then they're the ones that end up on the street, right?
Yeah,
That's
exactly. And then, of course, all the other policies, like the Green New Deal, cap and trade,
exactly
gas
right.
taxing. It's all regressive. And then we're headed towards normalizing everything, triple the cost. How inefficient is that? And where do you get the money? How can a small business pay $30 an hour?
No, you're exactly right, Bob, and I appreciate the points on all those. And then, when you talk about the inflation side, the other piece of that is obviously the cost, to help facilitate this. How much money we're paying out in all these government benefits that just debt spending, because again, they're on all these government assistance programs, money that we don't have as we're, over 30. I think we're over 38 trillion real time in debt now, and so that drives it up as well. And we now have the second biggest cost, just paying for the interest on the debt. So, yes, there are multiple layers in which the illegal immigration piece played into inflation. And by the way, just to tie up the point there on this, One of the reasons why I don't know how you're an economist. It used to be like a meteorologist is the only person who could be wrong most of the time and still have a job. Economists fit this bill, too. I don't understand how economists survive. But anyway, the reason why economists were so wrong on Trump's tariffs earlier this year, the Federal Reserve, too late and too wrong, Jerome Powell, still too late and too wrong, even with them the second cutting of interest rates earlier this week. But the reason why he was too late and too wrong, and they all were, is that they did not count into the scenario the exporting of illegal immigration. What happens if we stop the crisis at the border, which has happened? What happens if we have over 2.1 million illegal immigrants in this country that are deported, either through their own accord or because we've actually sent them out of the country, as the latest Department of Homeland Security numbers indicate? That ultimately takes the edge off of inflation in a very big way. And so one of the big reasons that the Trump tariffs have not proven to accelerate inflation is because of the combating of illegal immigration. There's so much that goes into it. So that was really good stuff. Good call. Let's go to, I really like this one. This was Peter in Hillsborough, New Jersey. Peter, I want to hear your thoughts on ghosts. But first, tell me what's going to happen in your state on Tuesday.
Well, my state is New Jersey, right? So I'm praying to all that is holy that Chitterelli gets in, because what ads have we seen? Mikey Sherrill's a helicopter pilot and a mother. Well, so freaking what? She never said what she's going to do. And he's got a good ad saying, how do you not know you made $7 million? Listen, man, I know when I made $7. So don't BS me and tell me you forgot where that money came from. So there's my take on that. If we get to the spiritual part of it, unless you have another question.
No, you're good. I appreciate the passion. I'm praying for you from Florida that your state gets it right this time. I think there's a legit chance.
Listen, ghosts, not like the Casper the Friendly Ghost thing or Charlie Brown's Halloween, but we're energy, right? So I think on right and left side of my brain, and the scientific side says everything, everyone, everything that ever existed was, is, and will be energy, right? And including human beings. So once our consciousness leaves us, wherever it goes, our soul, if you want to call it that, and leaves our shell of a body, we still have some energy. It doesn't go away. And that energy manifests itself back as things. Now, I can't explain what things or how they move, but that's what I believe, because I have been visited by relatives that have given me premonitions that have come true that I could never have known about, like where's Grandpa's coins hidden, stuff like that. So it's an energy, and
good stuff.
Nothing for nothing. If you don't believe it, you don't. That's fine. I'd still like to know if a Democrat believes in ghosts. So let's put it that way, because those are the demons, I got to tell you.
Good call, Peter. Appreciate it. Happy Halloween. Let's go to Jesse in Westchester, which is awfully busy, by the way, because a lot of the folks that have been scurrying from New York City in particular, like if they got to stay in the vicinity for jobs, heading your way. Welcome to the show.
And the criminals don't respect the border either. Brian, you're doing a fabulous job. This year we have 2 Halloweens tonight, and we also have one on November 4th. But you brought up New York City. I could tell you there's 6 ballot initiatives in New York City, and they don't bring it up, but they got to say no on it, because that'll give the mayor all the power to develop anything they want in anybody's neighborhood. You won't have any say. So he'll put a housing project in your neighborhood. If you say, I don't own the house. Yeah, but if you're renting there and it's nice, you want a homeless shelter put in there like Dinkins tried to do 30 years ago. So the 6 ballot initiatives have to be made, and they're bringing the people out. I can tell you, because I work in the city, from what I've told and what I've said, what I've seen, the elderly, older New Yorkers are coming out in big numbers, and that's not good for man doofus, And I always said it's time to really have the hard left go crazy. Get rid of the filibuster, because they're going to get rid of it when they're when they're in power with whatever name is, Cochise and stuff. So you know what we can do? Get rid of the 65 Immigration Act, and they will be going nuts. Why don't we want them going nuts?
Hey, Jesse, real quick. We got to go. You used to be a Democrat. You just flipped?
I flipped 2 years ago. I just
2
had
years
enough
ago.
of it because no bail, no police. Come on. And they were going around telling the elderly, don't call the police if you are a victim of a crime. Call the services. Or insanity. That to me,
we got to run, Jesse, but good call. Welcome to Sanity for sure. I'm Brian Mudd, in for the great one.
Mark Levin.
Folks, I have a question for you. Do you believe America's best days are still ahead? With the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence coming up in less than a year, my friends at the Heritage Foundation are taking stock of the current situation, and they need your input. They've launched a survey on America's future to gauge how Americans feel right now about where we are as a nation and where we're headed in the next 250 years. You know, for decades, your American values have been under attack, but now, with President Trump's administration in office, we have an opportunity to turn the tide and usher in a new golden age for America. But the Heritage Foundation needs to hear from you. What policies do patriots like you most care about? What do you believe are the defining principles of America? What legacy do you believe we should pass on to the next generation? Please visit heritage.org/Levin today and share your feedback and help shape the future of America. That's heritage.org/LEVIN. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation.
So I think it's two groups that it's so important to keep an eye out on. All right, changing the Republican Congress's net approval rating versus pre-shutdown. It's rallying the base for sure. Look at this. The net approval rating up 12 points versus pre-shutdown. But it's not just with the base. It's also with the middle of the electorate. Look at this. Among independents, it's up 8 points as well.
Yeah, that is CNN's Harry Inton, again, their data guy. Some really good takes this week. Republicans up 8 points with independents since the shutdown began. What does that tell you? Again, Democrats have treated voters like they're stupid. And a lot of voters, they were ignorant for a while. But the average American person is not stupid. And so this isn't working. From the shutdown to ICE to education, this is working. And so you take a look at that. There's a lot that isn't exactly working these days, including 34% of the federal government in a partial shutdown, now in its 31st day. We have the notable deadlines looming tomorrow for the SNAP program. Also, by the way, open enrollment for ACA, the Obamacare policies. Although in the here and now, through the first 31 days, I mean, aside from the abomination of essential federal government workers who've been working right along, they're not being paid on time. I would say that the partial government shutdown has been working. And not for politics, for the sake of politics, but for politics that can save this country from itself and truly work towards making this country great again. But just a couple ideas around this before I work into this idea. 31 days into the partial shutdown, here are just some of the things that are better off today. Your 401k. The stock market, save a couple of wobbles here the past couple of days, has continued to hit a series of record highs. Your wallet, in many ways. Price of gas hit multi-year lows. And that's in part because the value of the dollar in your wallet is also higher than 31 days ago. One of the things that's really interesting about this, you take a look at the U.S. dollar index, you take a look at the strength of the U.S. dollar, it's been stronger since the partial government shutdown. And that's even more unusual because the Federal Reserve is cutting interest rates. What does that tell you? And speaking of that, yes, the Federal Reserve cut interest rates, and so those are lower again. You have peace, as President Trump has brokered Middle East peace, in addition to peace between Thailand and Cambodia. By the way, there's even good news on things like child mortality and flu season that I'll bring you to. But there are so many different ways that this partial government shutdown is proving to work and be effective. And I'm going to break that down for you next. Brian Mudd in for the great one, Mark Levin.
This segment of the podcast is exclusively sponsored by Pure Talk. Pure Talk offers great coverage and can save your family money on your wireless bill every single month. Go to puretalk.com to find the plan that's right for you. Thank you again for listening, and thank you so much for this sponsorship, Pure Talk.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Look at the net approval ratings for Republicans in Congress. It's actually up 5 points since pre-shutdown. So what we're seeing here is the Republican brand in Congress has actually improved somewhat.
Well, shut the front door. Again, CNN's Harry Inton with some good data analytics this week that he's sharing with what was doubtless a very disheartened CNN audience. Not that there is much of one that's existing over there, but the few people that are left must just be like, holy crap. Can't even come here for safe space anymore. Get their feelings hurt by truth. Brian Mudd in for the great one, Mark Levin. Happy Halloween to you. We have so much that is actually constructive about the partial government shutdown, so much that is instructive about what's going on in the news, and really a lot of reasons to be optimistic with how things are trending, and not just because of what you're hearing from Harry Inton, but that is helpful, isn't it? We have heard that Republicans have surged by 8 points with independents since the onset of the partial government shutdown. We have heard that you are looking at a Democrat Party that has never had worse performance and ratings on a generic ballot. What you're seeing more than anything, because polls are whatever they are. And aside from the elections in Virginia, New Jersey, and New York City next Tuesday, don't mean a whole heck of a lot, except by way of temperature checks. And the most encouraging thing to me is how informed the average American has become, that they get it. So I want to talk about this a little bit. By the way, you may follow me socially at Brian Mudd Radio. Always an honor and a pleasure being here with you. The host of the Brian Mudd Show, home station, is not far from where the president is, WJNO in West Palm Beach. You can get the Brian Mudd Show podcast wherever you get your podcasts. So I want to talk a little bit about where we stand as we are wrapping up a full month, and along with that, full 31 days of a partial government shutdown. There are 3 parallel truths that are in play this Halloween that are pertaining to the partial federal shutdown. The first one is this, and I want you to ask yourself this question. My first point is that the average American living the typical life still has not felt the effect of the partial government shutdown in any way. I want you to think about that. I want you to ask yourself that question. Have you felt any impact whatsoever of the partial government shutdown? If you're a essential federal worker, if you're a furloughed federal worker, the answer is without a doubt yes. If you're in proximity to any of those folks, the answer is going to be yes. But the average American living the typical life through this 31st day has still not felt any impact whatsoever of the partial government shutdown. You wouldn't have the first flipping clue it existed if you didn't hear about it every day in the news, right? And here's a point that is so hard to underestimate. With 34% of the federal government having been offline for 31 days. See, here's the next little piece of that puzzle. Yeah, we've had partial government shutdowns before. Yeah, this is the second longest. Closing in on that 35 days of the longest that we had back in 2019 during Trump's first term. You don't even remember that, do you? And 2019 was a freaking great year, wasn't it? For the economy, for the country. Just awesome. Yeah, the year with the longest partial government shutdown. Isn't that interesting? But think about 34% of the federal government being offline. You know what we typically see offline during your average partial government shutdown? about 20% of the federal government. So it's not just that this is the second longest. It's that it is actually as extensive of a government shutdown. In other words, with more than a third of the entire federal government having been furloughed here, having been sidelined, that we've had. And here we are with over a third of the federal government offline for 31 days, and you wouldn't have the first flipping clue it happened if it weren't in the news. Right? Average American living the typical life. Very important point. Number two, it is an abomination that at a minimum, Democrats have directly voted not to pay essential federal government employees who've been working out throughout the partial shutdown. That is the most anti-American thing you could possibly come up with. How in the world can you say, yeah, you got to go to work. Yeah, you got to do things like literally protect this country. In the case of the military, work the most stressful job known to man, which is an air traffic controller. Yeah, you got to do that, but we're literally going to vote to deny you pay. Who does that? As I mentioned at the onset, you have to be a scumbag creep, which all but 3 Senate Democrats are, because they've done that. And so the average person working the average job, living the typical life, understands that point too. They understand that Republicans have attempted to pay employees again and again and again, and Democrats have stopped them every time from doing so because they're scumbag creeps, because those are the only people who would do such a thing. They get it. Americans aren't idiots. Democrats just treat them that way. The third point is this. The dynamic is on the precipice of beginning to shift the other way today, right? Specifically, that the average person hasn't felt the impact. So about that, your two kind of cliff events that kick in after today, and we'll see what happens with the whole SNAP thing. You had the 2 federal court rulings saying, hey, like wave a wand, Trump administration, and come up with money to pay SNAP. It's not constitutional not to pay it, even if the money may not be there. It must be. You take a look at these federal judges. You would imagine that they're at least reasonably smart people. In theory, they passed the bar. But then again, you take a look at who's been handed CDLs. You got like the illegal immigrants in California and Washington State. We found out that these are people that just kind of like sidled up to a border patrol agent and went, hey, essay, this where I say asylum. They learned how to say that. The NGOs that were operating that would be south of the border, telling them how to game the asylum system, they'd tell them how to do that. And so they would go ahead and do that. And then they get, oh, yeah, here are the brochures. And so you get all the government goodies now. And then they would end up in California and Washington State, not knowing how to speak any other English and not really knowing how to drive trucks either. And then they would get CDLs. And so that ended up happening. And a little bit of a interesting dynamic in the grand scheme of the migration events that have overall impacted this country. But as we're taking a look at the big events that kick in after today pertaining to SNAP benefits and the ACA. So federal funding for SNAP benefits, if the magic wand that the court said come up with these contingency funds that don't actually exist and pay SNAP tomorrow, if that doesn't happen, or even if it does, how long would that last? You currently have 41.7 million American families using the SNAP program. As for the ACA plans, you got 20.5 million families currently on them. Now, there is some overlap in those numbers. So it's not like it's over 62 million families all in. But you're still talking about a lot of people, still talking about over a fifth of the country at that point. But as of tomorrow, the shutdown would begin to impact, in theory, meaningful percentages of the overall population, including many of the most vulnerable. And so for these reasons, and to kind of where this thing goes from here, the pressure on congressional leaders, but especially Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, is almost certain to become immense. Because again, Republicans have been performing better. Democrats have been performing worse. The average American is not an idiot, and Chuck Schumer and his Democrats have been treating them like they are. And at the crux of the situation politically, Democrats have demonstrably overplayed their hand during this partial government shutdown. And it became as evident as anything when earlier this week, the largest federal employee union, which has historically backed Democrats 95% of the time and endorsed Kamala Harris, a union that endorsed and gave money to Kamala Harris for president last year, the American Federation of Government Employees. They urged Democrats to back the GOP continuing resolution, not just to pay the essential federal employees, but to open the government, to end the nonsense, to join the Republicans. What does it tell you when a Kamala Harris backing union says, get behind the GOP? And so, yes, this is all part of what you're seeing in the data, too. And so some of this we've had for you with the CNN data analysts. You can look at it in other ways. If you right now take a look at the Real Clear Politics average of polls pertaining to party favorability, something you're going to see in the side-by-side that jumps out at you. Republican Party's net favorability rating, 12 points higher right now than the record low favorability of the Democrat Party. You've barely got over a third of people that take a look at the Democrat donkey and go, hey, you know what I want to be hanging out with? Those nasty women over there. Which, by the way, remember the No Kings protesters recently? Ended up doing some analytics on that. I'm not likely to get into that in today's show. But the profile, by the time you go through all the analytics of the No King stuff, they're actually the nasty women of 2017. Minus Ashley Judd. I don't think Ashley Judd was out there. I'm not sure Madonna was either. But the rest of them, the nasty women of 2017, those are your No Kings protesters of today. Again, hate does not age well. That 8 years has not served a lot of them well at all, for sure. Be right back. Brian Mudd in for the great one.
Mark Levin.
There's a reason I'm proud to say Pure Talk is my wireless company, because they don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk, especially when it comes to supporting our veterans. This month, Pure Talk is choosing to support Canines for Warriors, an incredible organization that rescues and trains dogs, then pairs them with veterans struggling with PTSD. These are men and women who serve with honor, but when they come home, their brotherhood and support network they had in the military too often disappears. Canines for Warriors steps up to fill the gap, giving these heroes purpose, companionship, and healing. That's exactly why Pure Talk, a veteran-led company, supports them. Choose a wireless company that shares your values. And with talk, text, and plenty of 5G data for just $25 a month, you could also be saving a ton of money. Go to puretalk.com/Levin to make the switch today. Again, go to puretalk.com/LEVIN and switch to America's wireless company, my wireless company, Pure Talk.
Every American who is concerned about this, every American that is feeling the harm, you should call the Senate Democrats and tell them to stop the nonsense. Echo the voices of the unions, of the airlines, of hardworking people everywhere, and tell them to stop doing this and open the government.
House Speaker Mike Johnson earlier today. Hey there, Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin as we're taking a look at the realities on the ground as we're set to complete a full 31 days of the partial government shutdown the most extensive, with 34% of the federal government being offline all of this time. And the average American actually not noticing it at all, but some of that on the precipice of changing, perhaps. When you take a look at the miscalculations here with Democrats in this deal, you can evaluate the data, but also just the overall mood of the country. Because there are two very obvious things that I think illustrates just how out of touch with reality your TDS-riddled Democrat Party is. And the first would be this. Democrats, especially your elected elites, they are so TDS-driven. They believe this entire country, aside from what they view as a small group of MAGAs. And by the way, they'll call you that too. You ever been called, you're a MAGA? And I think, and you're not especially strong with grammar. They try to use that as a slanderous term. You're a MAGA. And they think it's a small group. And so this is their worldview. These elites that are elected, they think that the average person living the average life really does have a problem with President Trump. And thus really has a problem with the Republican Party, too. And it is so obviously blind to the reality that Joe Biden was without question one of the worst presidents in American history. The Democrats had control of everything and made everything worse for the average person living the average life trying to take care of their family. It's one of the great ironies. They had the government open, and what did they do? Open the borders, made the average family worse off by the day that they were in power. And so voters threw them out less than a year ago. And what have Democrats done since? Nothing but attempting to stop those very same people that voters voted for. It's such a basic concept. Voters understand this. One of the big dynamic shifts was Trump not just winning the election, but winning the popular vote as well. And they never got their brain wrapped around that deal. They just thought, oh, well, Biden was weak, and then Kamala is Kamala, and they made their excuses. But people still hate Trump. No, actually. They know that Donald Trump makes their life better through his policies, just as their policies made their lives worse. Meanwhile, what's been happening? Think about what's been happening all throughout the course of this year, including during the 31 days of this partial federal government shutdown. Slowly but surely, the average person living the average life, trying to take care of their family, doing a little bit better. Things are tough out there. Things are still tough, no doubt about it. But under Trump so far, the average income has finally risen above the rate of inflation. We spent years below that level. The average 401k, so we talked about, continues to hit record highs, along with those gas prices that are the lowest they've been since right after Trump was president previously. 4.5-year lows on that. So the rate of inflation lower. Interest rates are lower. Relative peace in the Middle East, various parts of other sections of the world. And so, yeah, life is far from perfect for the average person living the typical life, but it's better than it was before. And all Democrats are trying to do is take that away. Voters get it. Be right back. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin.
There's a reason I'm proud to say Pure Talk is my wireless company, because they don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk, especially when it comes to supporting our veterans. This month, Pure Talk is choosing to support Canines for Warriors, an incredible organization that rescues and trains dogs, then pairs them with veterans struggling with PTSD. These are men and women who serve with honor, but when they come home, their brotherhood and support network they had in the military too often disappears. Canines for Warriors steps up to fill the gap, giving these heroes purpose, companionship, and healing. That's exactly why Pure Talk, a veteran-led company, supports them. Choose a wireless company that shares your values. And with talk, text, and plenty of 5G data for just $25 a month, you could also be saving a ton of money. Go to puretalk.com/Levin to make the switch today. Again, go to puretalk.com/LEVIN and switch to America's wireless company, my wireless company, Pure Talk.
This is where Hollywood liberals come for rehab. The Mark Levin Show is back at 877-381-3811.
Should I come to work and hopefully get a future paycheck, or do I actually have to, put food on the table, put gas in the car, deal with the family pressures financially? And those are real decisions that controllers are making. And when they don't come to work, you see these kind of disruptions that are only going to continue and get worse.
Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy. Again, how evil do you have to be? How much of a scumbag creep do you have to be to have people that are going to work every day, but then vote as a Democrat to deny them their pay? No, we're not going to pay you. We are going to take a vote that says you do not get paid for doing the essential work of this country. You're a scumbag creep. You are a POS scumbag creep. Period. There is no justification, and Americans see through it. Americans see through it. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin. But you know what? You do still get a double dose of the great one this weekend. You have Life, Liberty, and Levin, 8 p.m. Eastern, Fox News Channel, of course, both Saturday and Sunday as usual. Make sure you have your DVR set. Tomorrow, for Saturday, you have Zuhdi Jasser and Ben Shapiro that are Mark's guests on Life, Liberty, and Levin. And on Sunday, you're going to have Douglas Murray. Now, talking about just the base level stuff here about the partial government shutdown. We've had 34% of the federal government that's been offline for 31 days now. You have had a situation where the average person living the typical life is actually, if anything, a little bit better off than they were before. They haven't felt the shutdown. You have a situation where Democrats can continue to treat voters like they're idiots, but all Democrats represent to the typical person is what Republicans, starting with Trump, what they've been working to fix. And then Democrats have the audacity to try to play the woe is the person on SNAP and woe is the government employee. Not dumb enough for that. You have to be just out to lunch to buy into these things. And so the Democrat Party has treated the average person living the average life as though they are idiots for years. And one of the things that the Biden administration did is talking about the difference between being an idiot and being ignorant. Ignorance can be filled with information. Stupidity is an aptitude issue. A lot of Democrats for a long time got away with ignorance. But the Biden administration and their control of Congress, what it did, it woke those people up because they realized, hold on, these people can really jack up our lives. They can really screw us up. Look at how expensive life is. I can't afford a roof over my head anymore. What the heck has happened here? All this crime. Where did these people come from? All these different things. It informed them in a very real way. That's what's changed in our country. It's profound. It's profound. The average American was reminded of how profound of an impact a terrible president and a terrible scumbag-ridden party can have on their daily life. People are paying attention. And generally, aside from Mamdani voters in New York City, they are not idiots. You do have to be an idiot to be a Mamdani voter. Just saying. So let's go to very patient Ivan in Miramar, Florida. Ivan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brian, how you doing, man?
All good.
Look, Brian, how rich is the irony that they pull their hair out calling Trump a Nazi and a fascist, but then they nominate Mamdani, an avowed communist and Jew hater. And I don't like to go there, but at some point I think you're right. Their voters either have to be stupid or they don't care about the truth, one or the other. Hey, Brian, if you want to see them pull their hair out after the president has returned from his successful foreign trip, we should refer to him not as king. King is not big enough. We should refer to him as World President Donald John Trump and let them pull their hair out. Brian, I'm hoping that the president will give a speech to the nation, explain, the next few nights, explaining the chaos and laying it at the feet of the Democrat Party, how they're trying to extort $1.5 million to pay for the health care of illegals, how they're putting the health care and the welfare of illegals above the American citizens. The Democrats, they want chaos. They want the looting. They're going to wait till after November 1st when the 42 million lose their food stamps or the SNAP benefits. They want the disruption of flights, the shortage of air traffic controllers. They want all of that chaos. And they're probably going to wait till after the election to see if they win a couple of seats so they can lie to themselves and say that they have, they think that they have support. But that's why I'm hoping that the president will give the speech and lay this all at the feet of the Democrat Party, the disruption, and make the Democrats, own it. Make them own all the chaos that they're putting the illegals above the American citizens. And at the same time, the president should remind America that a vote for Democrats is a vote for the looting, a vote for the chaos that's coming.
Well done. Well done. Appreciate you hanging on. And that was well said. Yeah, a couple things about that. And what you're talking about with Trump in particular, and, him getting out there and saying some stuff, as we're seeing in data, it's not working for Democrats. So it may not be the point that Trump needs to get out there and do like some type of primetime address and really hit it. I mean, he can, but the average person is getting it. So you can kind of take solace in that. But if he were going to do that kind of thing, the perfect timing would be Tuesday night. It would be election night in New Jersey, in Virginia, in New York City, because what we are hearing, and I've heard this from multiple sources that are strong sources, that Democrats are, in fact, and you alluded to it, waiting now until after Tuesday's elections to do something. They know they're in trouble. They know this has not worked out as planned. But now they're so terrified of their base that if they go ahead and end this before Tuesday's elections, that they're going to be perceived as weak. In fact, Jasmine Crockett, the nut job from Texas and the House, she said as much. I think that was earlier today. She ended up saying they think we're weak. And so they are held hostage by the Marxists, by the leftist radicals, and they're placating them. And they think that's the only way they're going to. And this is what gets me. And this is where I take a look at a real litmus test in states like Virginia and New Jersey. The Democrat strategy is we have to placate to basically a Mamdani kind of base in order to win elections in Virginia and New Jersey. I don't think most folks in Virginia and New Jersey are that nuts. I do think most people that are left in New York City are. I will be pleasantly surprised if it works out differently than it appears it will. Because I do think most of the people since got out of New York City some time ago. That said, I just, I pray, I hope that Virginia, New Jersey makes sense. But the time for Trump to give that speech would be Tuesday night and to lay out the exactly what we've been talking about, and he can lay out his successes too. But just how pathetic it is the Democrats are holding the country hostage because they're trying to win those elections in a couple of states, and I guess their desired candidate in New York City. Speaking of New Jersey, somebody else who's been hanging on the line for quite a long time. Let's go to Sandra in New Jersey, who I think has a few thoughts about Tuesday. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Brian. I have a lot of thoughts about Jack Ciattarelli. First, my brother texted me this last night. He writes to me, New Jersey voters have been feeling blue for a long time. They are getting angry and starting to see red. So that means he thinks we're going to win. Jack Ciattarelli is going to win. I can't tell you enough about this man. When he declared that he was going to run for governor, I invited him to the Women's Republican Club in New York for a meet and greet, and many, many people came, and he insisted that not one person pay the RSPB. He would pay for everyone. He said,
Wow.
I don't want people to have to pay for me. I'm going to take the bill, and he did.
That's cool.
And then I know he's real. And then when I gave my speech about him, in the speech, I said to him, Jack, tell me something about you when you were young. He goes, I led a pretty boring life, but he was class president 3 times in high school. He received the Outstanding Achievement Award in American History and the Model Citizenship Award as well. So, he's been that way since he's very, very young. And then I wanted to say another thing. Somebody spoke earlier on your show about flying a helicopter. You know, how Cheryl flies that helicopter. It's not a big deal because I remember a friend of mine had a helicopter. He invited me to sit in there with him. I actually got to maneuver it a little. It's not so hard like she makes it look. So
if you say so, I'll tell you what. I mean, I can't speak to that at all, but I'll take your word for it, Sandra. But appreciate the call. I think you made the case well, and I think you've proven the point that it's not just a Democrat Republican kind of situation, but you've got a great choice in New Jersey in particular, and I think it's a really important dynamic. And actually, well, I might have an opportunity to get to it a little bit later. I've got some splits on just how much of a move we have seen with voters over the past year. We're talking about everything we've seen in the polls here recently. But if you take a look at voter registration information, where it exists, states that have regular and updated voter registration information, what we've seen since Election Day of last year, when Trump won the popular vote, when you ended up having Republicans control Congress, we've actually seen what would amount to greater than 2.4 million net gains by Republicans over Democrats. If you were to project it just in the states that have partisan voter registration information that is updated monthly, if you take that information and you were to index it, if it applied across the country, you would see about another 2.4 million net gains for Republicans off of Election Day last November. And so when you take a look at how close the election was in New Jersey 4 years ago, really like Jack's chances. And I really hope you come through. I do think that New Jersey is ready for this. And I really hope Virginia doesn't decide it's going to start to slide a little bit the other way. Let's go to another place that has an important election. One where I'm not this optimistic. We'll see. Somebody who's right in the belly of the beast. Carlo in Queens. Carlo, what's the word on the ground?
Well, this guy Mondami popped out of nowhere like a real big surprise, and he's touting all this plans for socialism, basically inspired by the communists. His family, in fact, his father's very pro-communist socialist. But what's interesting, if you go back in history recently to Hitler, and from late 1920s into the early 1930s, he campaigned on a modified form of democratic socialism for Germany. And he eventually won the nomination and worked his way up to the point where in 1940 he began a war against his neighboring countries, decimated them, which finally led to 1945, where he ruined, decimated, bombed day and night by the Allies, and it was completely reduced into shambles. None of his plans worked. None of his schemes worked. In fact, there was a paper printed, a newspaper thing in 1931, showing Hitler smiling through the crowd, claiming that he had the answers to everything that needed to be done to make Germany strong. So you go to East Germany shortly after the war. East Germany became a democratic socialist republic, an autonomous republic out of Germany. Upon that rise as a power, their industries crumbled, the economy crumbled, and unemployment reached 25 to 30%. When Reagan went there and said, tear down the wall, in simple answer, they did. Gorbachev tore down the wall, and in a matter of a few years, East Germany melded back into the union with Germany and became a regular republic, and prosperity returned forthwith.
You're exactly right, Carlo. I mean, it's a good point that you're illustrating throughout history. We're not going to have time for you to work it all the way forward, but you're right. I mean, the excuse is it just hasn't been tried the right way, or you just get enough people that don't know their history because they haven't been taught it, and they are out to repeat it. So you're exactly right. Sincerely hope it doesn't go the way that it's looking like it might in New York City on Tuesday. Best wishes to you. Brian Mudd in for the great one.
Mark Levin.
There's a reason I'm proud to say Pure Talk is my wireless company, because they don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk, especially when it comes to supporting our veterans. This month, Pure Talk is choosing to support Canines for Warriors, an incredible organization that rescues and trains dogs, then pairs them with veterans struggling with PTSD. These are men and women who serve with honor, but when they come home, their brotherhood and support network they had in the military too often disappears. Canines for Warriors steps up to fill the gap, giving these heroes purpose, companionship, and healing. That's exactly why Pure Talk, a veteran-led company, supports them. Choose a wireless company that shares your values, and with talk, text, and plenty of 5G data for just $25 a month, you could also be saving a ton of money. Go to puretalk.com/Levin to make the switch today. Again, go to puretalk.com/LEVIN and switch to America's wireless company, my wireless company, Pure Talk.
We brought back home with us trillions of dollars, trillions, many trillions of dollars, and our country is doing well.
Yeah, it sure is. That was President Trump as he deplaned Air Force One at Palm Beach International on his way to Mar-a-Lago earlier this afternoon. And here's what's happened over the past month when 34% of the federal government has been shut down. One, you likely still haven't noticed. Two, President Trump has taken over 50 executive actions that have secured the hostage release of the 20 living Israelis, brokered a 20-point peace plan in the Middle East, peace between Thailand and Cambodia, taken out what is estimated to be 30% of the drug running into this country. You keep seeing and hearing about the counter narcotics task force. You know how we're blowing these narco boats out of the water? We have now taken out what is estimated to be almost a third of all of the drug running into this country. How impressive is that? He's brought in an additional $5 billion in tariffs. He's negotiated most favored nation status. People don't even talk about this. Pricing for prescription drugs. AstraZeneca is going to save Americans over $15 billion annually on drugs from Trump's negotiation with them, while also securing an additional $50 billion in R&D investments into this country. Secured a Chinese trade deal to end the U.S. soybean embargo. Theoretical crackdown on fentanyl shipments. Although anytime we hear China say, yeah, we're going to crack down the fentanyl, I'll believe that one when I see it. And by the way, here's something else. The estimated economic growth rate has risen to 3.9%. Today, as we wrap up October, you take a look at what we're going to see with the GDP. Federal Reserve, the Atlanta Fed GDP now saying 3.9% growth most recently, too. So that's what's been happening with the President of the United States over the past 31 days. And for that matter, benefiting you, too. Be right back. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
This is, in fact, the worst position Democrats have been on in a generic ballot at this point in midterm when there was a Republican president in the last 20 years. And this is no different from pre-shutdown. So Republicans aren't losing on this metric either. They become more popular, and they're actually in a pretty good position for them historically when it comes to the generic congressional ballot.
Dun, dun, dun. Definitely not what your typical CNN viewer would want to see or hear. But that is CNN's data guy, Harry Inton, bringing the dose of reality to the CNN audience earlier this week. So much has not worked as the Democrats have planned 31 days into this thing. Happy Halloween. Brian Mudd in for the great one, Mark Levin. Always an honor and a pleasure to be here with you, truly. And I am broadcasting from a home station, WJNO in West Palm Beach. You can catch me podcast anywhere. I mean, you can always stream us, too, for that matter, in my morning show live if you want to. But the Brian Mudd Show podcast, would love it if you check out the Brian Mudd Show podcast. And you can always follow me socially, too, at Brian Mudd Radio. The partial shutdown, you know what's really done? It's proven the need to make it permanent. The partial shutdown has proven the need to make it permanent. What we really have that has been sitting in front of us, if you are a limited government conservative, is a gift. This is a problem solved. So here we are on the 31st day of the partial government shutdown, also known as the 31st consecutive day that there has been zero impact on your life from this partial government shutdown that has resulted in 34%, more than a third of the federal government not operating. Over a third of the federal government not operating, and you wouldn't have the first flipping clue if it weren't in the news. And at this point, not only are Democrats playing into President Trump's hands by having forced the shutdown, but increasingly, they play into his hand by illustrating how we could immediately cut about a third of the size of the federal government permanently. Boy, what Doge wanted to do, right? And by the way, Doge is still doing. Doge still exists. I track that every now and then. They have still been cutting things, not at the pace of when Elon was still there. And by the way, I do still think there's a 50-50 chance that at some point in the future, Elon breaks out that Trump was right about everything hat again. I don't think it was just a handshake at the Charlie Kirk memorial. I do think that Elon will come back around again because I think this thing is trending in a very positive direction for what he wanted to accomplish. And again, aside from Doge actually still doing some jobs, they've cut now $214 billion Doge has saved you as a taxpayer, by the way, over $1,300, I believe it's $71 most recently. Not bad. But anyway, consider this. The total federal government spending for the fiscal year that we just ran through was $6.75 trillion. With the federal deficit that checked in at just over $1.9 trillion. Now, let's just say for drill that we permanently cut 34% of the federal government. You know what we'd have? In addition to more freedom financially and otherwise? Well, look at this. An end to budget deficits. No kidding. In the most recently completed fiscal year, the one that ended in September, hence where we are with this, funds haven't been appropriated, so we spent the whole month of October in the partial shutdown. If 34% of the federal government had not been in place last year, all other dynamics being the same, you'd have run an approximate $300 billion surplus. How does that sound to you, given that, again, you haven't even known there's been a partial shutdown to this point? $300 billion surplus. Now, it's not meant as a literal exercise. Somewhere out there, somebody's going to get super literal because obviously the amount of spending across the currently impacted agencies may not necessarily and neatly add up to 34% of total federal spending. And you can get into federal spending does impact overall economic growth. And so you might have GDP impacts and all that. But I'm speaking to broad themes and points here about limited government principles and the likelihood that we could take care of the deficit problem by doing this too. By the way, it is also unrealistic that every position that's currently furloughed could simply be ended. For example, you don't find many people hanging out minding the store at the IRS right now. And on a personal note, would I like to abolish the IRS? Yes, but we had better put in some type of new system first, or else I think we'll have a bigger revenue problem going forward than we've had before, because something tells me the honor system for paying taxes wouldn't exactly work out so well. But again, the broader point here remains. Effectively, over a third of the federal government can be gone for a month without almost anyone other than those that directly worked for the federal government or those related to them knowing anything. So would you rather have the federal government back to full bloat or budget problem solved and into our country's debt and deficit problems? What would eventually lead to lower taxes? Certainly lower inflation. All these things, if handled responsibly. And one of the things that I think is so instructive in this, it's a choice. It's a choice. You know, it's one of the things that Elon, in his position in particular, brought to the entire conversation is, you know, this is all a choice. We choose to just do the baseline budgeting. We choose to just do things the way they've been done before. But nobody who has ever made a meaningful difference from an entrepreneurial standpoint in this country has ever done things exactly the way they were done before, right? By definition. And so what you realize is we can do things a lot differently than we've been doing them. It's a choice. It was a choice for the federal government to become ridiculously bloated and run a multi-trillion-dollar budget deficit every year. It was a choice that would continue to do all these lunatic policies like open borders and you know, free puppies and free candy and free Obama phones that are anything but free. That just lead to budget deficits, higher inflation, high interest rates. All of it's a choice to keep it bloated and to deal with higher than needed inflation, interest rates, and taxes. So a permanent end to over a third of the federal government would be like a massive problem solved, far greater quality of life for all but the directly impacted, and a smattering of businesses that feed off of like K Street crony capitalism. Some of the other things we've seen during the course of this month, by the way, that I think are highly instructive, speaking of the swamp, did you know that there is a diseased temple that's been within that swamp too? You know, swamps notoriously difficult to navigate. They are fraught with danger. And for that reason, not a surprise that there are new discoveries that are made within the D.C. swamp. So it's not just furloughed non-essential government employees in D.C. today. There are actually fewer essential, quote unquote, creatures in it as well. So in addition to the furloughed federal government employees, Kash Patel has had himself a month. He has sent an undisclosed number, but what appears to have been a large number of FBI agents packing throughout the course of this month as he has peeled back the layers on those that were involved in very conspiratorial ways, that were willing participants in Biden-era anti-Americanism, like the Arctic frost situation that's been uncovered. So following the revelation that the FBI under the Biden administration and under special criminal, our man Jack, that you had all of the Republican congressmen, businesses, AGs, attorneys, donors spied on. And who knows, maybe even you too. Accessing cell phone information that Verizon was willing to hand over, AT&T was not. With all this stuff going on, FBI Director Kash Patel had this to say while addressing the firing of agents involved in political targeting campaigns. He said, "We're cleaning up a diseased temple 3 decades in the making, identifying the rot, removing those who weaponize law enforcement for political purposes, and those who do not meet the standards of this mission while restoring integrity to the FBI. I promise reform, and I intend to deliver it." Yeah, I thought it was interesting. We see what is coming out in the news being met with action on the inside, too. As Kash is going, yeah, these are swamp creatures that corrupt agents in the FBI. You're out too. So that's been happening throughout the course of this month, along with the news cycle. By the way, I've been talking about how the average American, not an idiot, related Sinclair Media recently polled on this. And I think Sinclair is interesting because we found out they're one of the media outlets that happened to be spied on as part of the corrupt investigation and subpoenaing of records. 82% of the greater than 17,000 respondents said that they thought that the FBI had become politically weaponized. And so it's the latest example of a bloated government that had grown out of control. Less government equals a more responsive government, including providing fewer opportunities for bad actors like that to hide and for something to become so pervasive. I mean, when you have volumes of corrupt FBI agents, what does that say? So government oversight, tough thing to do when you have 430 federal government agencies with over 2.2 million employees. It's less likely that you're going to have diseased temples that could be built in the swamp. That is, if much of it were already drained. And one of the things we found out is, it wasn't just cash. AG Pam Bondi, she's been doing quite a bit to clean house too. And up to this point, hadn't necessarily thought she had been doing a great job. But we've learned a lot about her performance during the month as well. And so I'll bring you a little insight on what she's been working on next. I'm Brian Mudd, in for the great one.
Mark Levin.
They become crazed lunatics. All they have to do is say, let's go, let's open up our country, and everything snaps back into shape.
The crazed lunatics, they're scarier than the Halloween creatures that are out there. Happy Halloween. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin. And it has been a wild thing. You know, if you were setting a plan to try to destroy the Democrat Party, you'd have a hard time doing better than what they have decided to do. Like their plan A. Good old Chuck U. Schumer, as Rush like to say. His plan, how's that worked out for him? How's it worked out for Democrats? As we have seen a surge of independents move towards Republicans, as we continue to see Democrats with record low favorability. It's a pretty remarkable thing. Talking about the need and the illustration we've had over the 31 days to truly right-size the federal government. And one of the things I thought was interesting originally, because I'm always doing analysis on stuff, when I realized, hold on, the average federal government shutdown only has about a fifth of the federal government offline. This one's doing 34%. I mean, Trump, even with the 3 partial government shutdowns, including the longest that we've had, the 35-day one in 2019, even that, he didn't take 34% of the federal government and sideline it, but he did this time. And this after we had Doge, led by Elon Musk early in the year, and Doge very quietly, minus Big Balls and company, still doing the job right now. Not as aggressively as Elon and Big Balls, but, you know, still getting the job done. But you're seeing the opportunity to finish what Doge started here. But we're also seeing during this partial government shutdown, not just how easy it is for the average American to live their average life without feeling any impact from over a third of the federal government not working. We've also seen the FBI cleaning house from deep state actors, and that's not all within the DOJ. So Attorney General Pam Bondi, honestly, like until recently when I saw a lot of what was going on under the hood, I'd have given her a D on her performance. I have not been impressed this year, from mishandling of Epstein disclosure to what feels like, you know, status quo in terms of federal accountability. There just was not a lot that she had done that made me have a whole heck of a lot of confidence that she was doing what needed to be done to clean up the government swamp. But recently, a lot of that started to become more clear. And some of it did have to do with, cash cleaning house at the FBI, but it was all throughout the DOJ. So she talked about this to a certain extent earlier this month on Capitol Hill before the Senate. She was brilliant as she laid out what she's been doing behind the scenes to clean up the crime and illegal immigration crisis in ways that hadn't necessarily been in the news, but also that she had been laying off hundreds of DOJ deep staters too. So all throughout the course of this partial shutdown, it's not just the folks that have been furloughed. You have a real accounting of bad actors as they're being identified. Things like Arctic Frost, those that were involved, those that acted inappropriately, those that violated their duty, they're gonzo. They're gonzo. And so we are seeing in so many different ways accountability coming back in, the swamp actually being cleaned up this time around, Trump having the right people in place to get the job done, along with the illustration of how this can come together and work as a plan. And as this is all playing out, Republicans are benefiting politically from it too. It's one of the more instructive windows of time we've had in American history, because all government has ever done is grow, right? It's all it's ever done. And every federal government shutdown always ended in more of the same. Not this one. This is the one that will finally lead to a smaller federal government coming out of it than going into it. And that's regardless of how this one ends. Be right back. Brian Mudd in for the great one, Mark Levin.
When Mark Levin was a kid, his teachers didn't like his snide sense of humor. Today, they still don't like it. Call Mark Levin now at 877-381-3811.
Enjoy it, Cuomo. Enjoy it, Zoran Mandami, because your tricks or your treats will not work. I don't delve in fantasy. I delve in reality.
Yeah, Curtis Sliwa, as we walk towards Tuesday and whether New York City is ready to head into the abyss, whether it's going to be the big old toilet drain of what used to be a great city. Kind of hard to imagine the world's epicenter of capitalism being run by somebody who doesn't believe in it. I can't imagine that will work out well. I'm here in South Florida, starting after the lockdowns, where there's a little breathing room and people could get themselves out of New York City. I know people that literally came on their yachts from New York to South Florida and stayed out of there. And we became known as Wall Street South in South Florida, between the Palm Beaches and Miami. And I got to imagine, if Mamdani gets this thing, what was left of Wall Street, the original one, maybe even the bull, is going to end up being sent down here, because I just do not know how those two coexist. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin. And as we take a look at Levin, you have him this weekend. You are not fortunate enough to have him this evening, but you do have him this weekend. So Life, Liberty, and Levin, 8 p.m. Eastern, Fox News Channel, of course, Saturday and Sunday. Always set your DVR. Sudi Jasser and Ben Shapiro, Mark's guest tomorrow. And then on Sunday, his guest is Douglas Murray. So check out Life, Liberty, and Levin. So yeah, the Mamdani effect. We've been taking a look at what the implications would be. I did an analysis for Florida on this. We had tens of thousands of people that came to our area specifically from New York City during the whole rush out there after COVID. We would see something. Mamdani wins based on the amount of interest. And we can tell by people that are inquiring about relocating. We are talking about something almost on par with COVID. So it'd be almost COVID 2.0 in terms of the people that look like they would get out of Dodge, get out of New York City to come here. And it'll be interesting. Be interesting to see, because you have a lot of folks that are going to Westchester, going nearby areas that are like trying to get just outside of the city limits, but still work in the city. I think a lot of those businesses are going to go. I think a lot of the remaining Wall Street firms might say, see ya. Let's take a look. Speaking of New York, we'll start there. We got Jim, upstate, Albany. Welcome to the show.
Mr. Mudd, how you doing?
All good.
So I got to tell you, I've been listening to you for a while, and, you keep talking about how people are starting to wake up. You never know it living in this state, unfortunately. I've lived here my whole life.
Sorry.
But I am a firm believer in, a firm believer in the representative republic that we should all cherish. So I have all three of my lawmakers on speed dial: Chuck Schumer, Kirsten Gillibrand, and my local congressman, Paul Tonko, 20th District, state of New York. Anyway, I tried to call Gillibrand and nobody answered. I've called Chuck Schumer's office for as long as that man has been in the office, and not one single time have they ever answered the phone. Now, I must say that my congressman, Paul Tonko, they always answer the phone. Now, Paul's a flaming lib, don't have much in common at all with him, but I reached out about the shutdown, and I received a letter, which I got to tell you, I always do, from his office. This is how it starts. Dear Mr. Fox, thank you for contacting me about the fiscal year 2026 budget process and the current Republican shutdown. I appreciate hearing from you. As we experience another devastating government shutdown caused by Republican obstruction and intransigence, we are once again witnessing the GOP's continued willingness to hold our nation hostage to their partisan, unpopular demands. Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House, giving them the ability to pass the budget plan that prioritizes the health and well-being of American families. But instead of using that power to help their constituents, the GOP has refused to negotiate a bipartisan budget solution that protects essential health care for millions of working Americans. My Democratic colleagues and I will not stand idly by while the Republicans gut health care and enable the Trump administration to continue. It goes on to say, and I just want to thank you for listening, but I want to go on to say this. To make matters worse, the Trump administration has added to the chaos by posting unhinged, racist, deepfake videos on social media and sending out blatantly partisan messages on official agency websites.
So triggered, too.
Taxpayers paying for this lie.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it illustrates the TDS. Thanks for the call. I'm sorry you're suffering in the Capitol in Albany. By the way, I got family that has long been suffering in Buffalo. It's never too late. I mean, it really is pretty great down here. So, I mean, you can be. It's actually interesting. If I take a look at my family and both my parents from upstate, and you can pretty much draw along political lines. I think almost all of the libtards in my family are still in New York. In fact, I think they all are, actually. And the ones that like move south, move back, that type of deal. Some of my family will correct me if I'm off on that a little bit. But I think all the libtards in my family that loathe me live in New York still, and everybody that had sense left. And so I understand people have reasons why you're still there. But if you are a long-suffering New Yorker, especially if you're in New York City, but otherwise, I mean, the grass really can be greener. And when you talk about your representation in that state, I will say things are a little bit better when your governor is Ron DeSantis and your senators are Rick Scott and Ashley Moody, among other representatives. Although I got to say, I mean, one thing that is an abomination. So I'm in the same district as President Trump. We have Lois Frankel, who is just one of the most useless Democrats in existence in the House. So, I mean, there is that. It's not perfect. We got work to do here, too. But nevertheless, let's go to Robert. He's been patient. He's in Athens, Alabama. Robert, welcome to the show.
Oh, how you doing, Ben?
All good.
Well, that's great. You know, this has been coming for a few years now. I mean, you know, before Trump got his election the first time. And, you know, they tested the water, but now it's coming out. They're coming out and telling the people they're communists. They're telling them they're, radicals and all this, AOC, the Five, or whatever they're called. All the isms are starting to come out. And this is what they've been waiting for. This is not new. They're trying to ruin America.
So, Robert, you're exactly right. They have played the long game for decades. You have, certainly Karl Marx, that is the impetus behind this. But most recently, we will frequently point back to Zelensky. We'll point back to rules for radicals. And certainly Obama, a student of all of that and personally involved in all of that. And you see the plan that is coming together. So you're exactly right. All by design, overwhelm the system. This is what open borders were all about. And it's an interesting dynamic, too, as we've learned more about Team Autopen and how little Joe Biden was really likely minding the store. You wonder, what would Joe Biden, if he had been of sound mind at any point, really enacted the kind of border policy he did? But you see how effective it was to have somebody who was not at home mentally, where you had Team Autopen that could just open the borders, that could try to overwhelm the system. And this is one of the real challenges. One of the things I was taking a look at, if you look at the estimated 11 plus million illegal immigrants that came over just during Biden's 4 years, so far, a lot of progress. We've gotten about 2.1 million out. And by the way, they're running 4-to-1 self-deportations. And this is a huge part of the Trump plan to try to fix all of that is when you end up engaged in actual deportations and they demonize how the conditions at the detention facilities are in the process, you got a lot of people that are like, you know what? I don't want to wait around and see if I do get caught up in that. And so I'm going to leave. And a lot of people have. By the way, one of the big debates, and this is a turnover in ICE just within the past couple of weeks, you are starting to see at some of these key field offices, some of the longstanding ICE field officers that only wanted to go after what are known as criminal illegal immigrants or those that had rap sheets rather than, say, day laborers, that kind of thing. You had the Border Patrol folks who are like, no, we want to go after all illegal immigrants. And you're starting to see in a lot of field offices, there have been 12, including some big ones like in L.A., where Border Patrol people, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem just put some of those people in charge of the ICE field offices that have been run by people that didn't want to cast a broad net. And that's important because when you have people that know people that suddenly get picked up that are here illegally, that will help create another wave of illegal immigrants leaving the country. But that's important because that was the grand plan. They were very close to overwhelming the system. And had Kamala Harris won, had they continued to flood our country the way they were with illegals, the unsustainability, the inflation, yeah, they might have gotten there. I mean, we really were at the brink last year. And New York City, real time, at the brink right now. Let's go to Russ in Portsmouth, Ohio. Russ, welcome to the show.
Thank you. There were Democrats in the days of Jesus. They were called Pharisees. And Jesus said, "You are of your father, the devil, and his desires you will do." He was a murderer from the beginning and did not abide in the truth. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it. This cannot be explained naturally. It's diabolically evil. There is an entity. Jesus called him the devil. He's called Lucifer. He's called Satan, whatever. And that's behind this whole thing. I'm a preacher, and I preach a lot about this. And I have one sermon called The Isms of the Devil. And the very first one is, my point is egoism.
Yes, sir.
He's the most gigantic, supreme egotist in the universe.
Yeah, Russ, and I appreciate you being there and appreciate what you do. May God bless you. I on a personal note, think that's pretty good poll right there. Democrats of 2,000 years ago. And also this Halloween as well, as you talk about the supernatural and the evil as well. Let's go to Frank in Charleston, South Carolina. Frank, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ben, thanks for taking my call. I have a comment and a question, and you can answer with me offline. First, my comment is George Will was on television. He says he wants Mondami to win in New York because we need a socialist experiment to fail every 20 years in this country to vaccinate us against the left in communist rule, which I really agree with. I think we have to see catastrophic failure before we pull back. My question is this. Santos was convicted for really excessive, not just one, but multiple transgressions, felonies, and Trump pardoned him. Now, does he not think, and we're the party that believes in justice, we're the side that believes in, you do it, you pay, and he pardons him. Do you not think that the Democrats will use that as license to pardon Comey and Obama or whoever else?
Well, a couple things on that. I mean, one, would I take a look at Santos and go, he should be pardoned? No. But, me today wouldn't necessarily agree with me 5 years from now. So, you're never going to agree with everybody 100% of the time on their decisions. What I would tell you about, does this pave the path for Democrats to do X? They're going to do it anyway. Look at what they've done. Look at the lawlessness going all the way back to Trump-Russia collusion. Take a look at what they've done with the deep state actors. Everything that's been uncovered with Arctic frost. They're going to do it anyway. And by the way, as President Trump today has called on, hey, you know what? Go ahead and end the legislative filibuster. Do the nuclear option. You know what? Probably should, because at some point Democrats are going to do it. That's one of the things is Republicans keep acting as though Democrats are people of principle. When was the last time that party acted on principle? I'm Brian Mudd, in for the great one.
Mark Levin.
Yeah, that's the White House band again for the trick-or-treating that took place with President Trump and First Lady Melania. And I was thinking about that. Very well done by the band playing at the White House for the Halloween trick-or-treat event. I was thinking, I wonder, when Bill was president, is that what would happen when Hillary would get close? It's like, if you're thinking about when would that music be appropriate at the White House this side of Halloween, it's like, oh, Hillary's coming. You could sense that, you could feel it. Happy Halloween to you. Always a pleasure here with you. And I pulled some research of mine I'd referenced a little bit earlier in the show because I think it's relevant to what I've been talking about with what the Democrats are doing here, not working, with the partial shutdown, having provided a historical insight into how we can right-size this government and how we can finish what Doge has started. Talking about the politics of this, not from a polling standpoint, but from a voter registration standpoint. So for perspective on how big the swing politically could be, we are continuing to see in voter registration trends, whether it's blue states, red states, swing states, demographically consistent trends. Democrats are continuing to shed younger men of all ages, actually, but especially younger men, Latinos. And for perspective on how big the swing could be, the 6 states that provide monthly voter registration changes, the year-over-year change in those 6 states, to the benefit of Republicans is 482,000 voters. And again, this is over last November. That's across Arizona, Florida, Iowa, Nevada, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. By the way, some very important swing states there when you hear about Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. If you indexed that for the entire country, if we saw those trends play out, 2.7 million more net Republican voters than a year ago when Trump won and Republicans took control. So things are working. Hopefully some voters make some smart decisions in Jersey and Virginia. And who knows, maybe in New York City too next Tuesday. It's been an honor and a pleasure. Brian Mudd in for Mark Levin. Happy Halloween.